afternoon, everyone. My name is Grace Glass. I am the State Director here at BLEXIT, Florida, and you are entering into our debate, pro-life versus pro-choice. And we know that that's a very controversial topic, but we have two very strong, opinionated people right here on our platform today wanting to share with you all their perspectives on the topic of abortion. So before we dive any further, I will let Alicia go forth and introduce herself. Alicia, tell us your name, your title with BLEXIT Florida, and then go ahead and tell us where you stand on this, on the fence when it comes to abortions.
Hi, my name is Alicia, and I am the Assistant State Director for BLEXIT Florida, and I stand on the pro-life side only because I feel like I said it's the one with the most sense. We have so many different options before we get to abortion, so I don't feel like abortion is necessary in that sense.
All right. And Joelle?
Yeah, so my name is Joel Brown. I am on the pro-choice side. I am very much pro-choice, as a matter of fact, because I believe in freedom, liberty, and choice. And that's what America's all about, is choice and freedom, being able to do what you want with your own bodily autonomy and not having the government try to tell you or regulate your body. That's my position, and that's why I'm staunchly pro-choice. I fundamentally disagree with all arguments that support the pro-life argument.
All right,
with all due respect.
Thank you, Joelle. Thank you, Joelle. Some guidelines in this debate. We're fully a mature adult, so I just ask that there's no profanity here in the debate. I ask that there's, of course, no name calling. I don't think that any of you are name callers, but there could be some times in our discussion where emotions are triggered and maybe some things get fiery up here. But just be in mind that you can still get your point across without having to use any profanity, without having to degrade anyone's character or demeanor. Also, you have time to answer questions. This is a free-for-all, so if you go over 5 minutes, I don't think any of you probably will in your answers, but if you go over 5 minutes, you'll be paused. You will have time for rebuttals as well. So yeah, I think we're ready to go ahead and get started with this debate. So my first thing, so the word abortion, the one word abortion, what comes to mind when you hear that word? Joelle, let's start with you. One word, when you hear the word abortion, what comes to mind for you?
Optional.
Optional. Okay. Alicia?
Irresponsible.
Irresponsible. Alicia, why do you say irresponsible?
Well, because like I was just stating earlier, that there's just so many different ways that you can avoid this. Like I said, there's many different kind of birth controls, the shots, the pills, you have condoms, you have avoiding it altogether. And I feel like there shouldn't be you have so many steps before you actually get to having a baby that'll lead you up to abortion. That's why I say it's irresponsible.
Irresponsible. Okay. And Joelle, you said optional. When you hear the word abortion, you think of optional.
That's correct. I think of optional because that is exactly what the pro-choice position calls for. That's why it's called that, choice. I believe that a person should be able to choose what they'd like to do with their body. So I like to give them options. We're not necessarily pro-abortion per se, because again, nobody really likes the abortion. I've never really seen anybody cheerlead for abortion. It's a very serious thing that can be very traumatizing to a woman. So I believe that there should be an option to avoid things like that. To make it easier for people to be able to make those decisions for themselves, because they are life-altering decisions, and I would want to have a choice in it, just like any other serious issue.
Okay. All right. You said make it easier. That's interesting. Now I want to ask you, Joelle, what is your definition of abortion? If you were to, just using your own words, how would you define abortion? What is abortion to you?
To me, it's simply the termination of a pregnancy. Nothing more, nothing less.
Alicia, what is abortion to you? How would you define abortion?
Murder.
Murder.
Of a possible being.
Look
Not
at the
even
difference.
possible. It's going to turn into a human being.
Very interesting that you said that.
It's a potential. Joelle, you want to
Not even
Yeah.
potential.
Well, okay. Would you like to rephrase that? Because you said it is going to turn into a human, which would imply that it's not a human yet. And you're right, believe it or not.
Hmm. Well, before it gets a heartbeat, and then at some point it does get a heartbeat, and then it does get its veins and all of its tensions, and it's able to like feel things. So if you want to try to abort the baby before it has a heartbeat, I mean, I still don't agree with abortion in general, but I know that's something that people are pushing for. But I do still believe that if there shouldn't even be an abortion if you would have took the proper steps necessary before you even got there.
Well, in regards to
but before you go on, Joel, Alicia, what kind of proper steps? What kind of proper steps?
As in not having, just in general, not doing it anyway because you already know the turnout of it, or making sure that you're taking the precautions, which is birth control, any form of birth control, or if it just so happens after, there is the day after pill. So, and then obviously condoms. We have all of those options before we can even get to abortion.
Okay, and Joelle, she says there's many options to prevent pregnancy from happening, which would also reduce the number of abortions. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that that's wrong, first of all.
What's wrong about it? What's wrong exactly? What's wrong?
So it's half right depending on where you live in regards to the argument that there's many ways to avoid it and to reduce the number. And I'll get to that in just a moment because that's very important. And that's actually a key, very, very key factor in the pro-choice debate and a very big flaw in the pro-life debate. And I'll explain why. It has to do with Congress and the legislature that's being proposed and passed.
Okay.
Now, first of all, I think Alicia hit the nail on the head originally when she made the claim that it eventually has a heartbeat and eventually it does become a human. But before that, I would argue that it's actually a clump of cells that has no feeling. It has no capability of feeling pain. It's basically it doesn't feel pain until the third trimester, which is about 27 weeks in. Now, the heartbeat, yes, generally it does come before around the 6 weeks. But the thing is, again, even before that, because Alicia says that she's against the abortion, but she understands that people before 6 weeks are able to get one. So I think that that's pretty interesting. But again, the concept of an embryo's moral personhood, I think, is nebulous given the lack of sentience and biological independence. And also, of course, as I mentioned beforehand, I don't believe in fetal personhood, and I think the rights of a woman take precedence over the embryo. So worst case scenario, if it does feel the pain, let's just say it feels the pain from the moment of conception, you know what? That sucks, but I care about the woman that's bearing that quote-unquote child more than I do the quote-unquote child itself, if you know what I mean.
And I think Alicia, her point is she speaks for the unborn. You're speaking for the women rather, and she's been the voice for the unborn. So you may call it. So you call it a clump of cells, as in, she's saying you call it a clump of cells, and she's saying that clump of cells has the potential to be a human being. You say it does. However, at the time that most abortions
it does. That's a fact.
Mm-hmm. It does what?
It does develop into a human eventually, absolutely.
So do you think wait. So the point of the embryo developing it to a human where it can feel, where it does have the organs, the arteries, the skeletal system is being formed. Do you think that as it's forming to be a human, that abortion at that time of the human features coming into full play where they're visible, is that considered murder now, or is it still considered just a clump of cells? That's a lot.
Well, that's an interesting question, because I was going to say, yes, I think it is okay to still have the abortion at that time, even when it does become, when it is able to feel pain. Again, it's called pro-choice for a reason. It's not my business. So pro-choice is another way to say I'm pro minding my own business. Again, yeah, I am totally fine with that. Absolutely. Because again, I care more about the living the woman that is bearing the child, who is feeling it, who is going through all of that. I have more empathy for her than I do the what starts off as a clump of cells transforming into a human.
I want to ask a question. How many abortions do you think that a woman should have? Just
as many as she wants.
So she can just go on it, and all you care about is her. Because it sounds like that you're okay with her being irresponsible. Is
Well,
what
when
you're
you put
saying.
it seems like you're trying to corner me by adding in that last part, saying that I'm okay with her being irresponsible. I don't really consider it being irresponsible, because people are going to have sex no matter what. That's just a human thing. It's nature. I mean, people want to have sex. They're going to have sex. Mistakes are made, and we should be willing to give people the option. If they can't take care of that child, there's a lot of factors that go into it. If that person doesn't feel like they're ready for motherhood, then absolutely they should have as many as they feel necessary. It's a very serious thing, and people don't just do it because they want to be careless and that they just have no regard. I mean, like I said earlier, it's a very traumatizing thing. So, yeah, no, absolutely. I think a woman should be able to have as many as she like if it means that it'll benefit her life long term. And I know, as gruesome and barbaric as that sounds, well, you have to think about it. See, that's one of the things as well. The pro-life movement thrives on the ethical argument. It's when you put the ethics aside and you actually look at the data and the science, you'll see that the pro-choice side makes a lot more sense.
So we can just go throw babies in the garbage. Basically,
well,
I mean, that's pretty much what it sounds like to me. It's like,
interesting.
I can't. Well,
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Alicia. I apologize.
It's like, how do I want to say this? We can't talk about that. I mean, there's people who do throw their kids in the garbage.
Well, I'd like to ask, since you mentioned that, just specifically what you said about throwing them in the garbage. That's a very interesting point. Are you familiar with in vitro fertilization?
Yeah.
Okay, could you explain it to me? Just you have heard of it, right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, in vitro fertilization, so basically there are hundreds of thousands of embryos that are actually, quote unquote, thrown away. Kind of like I said, in regards to what you said about throwing them in the trash. There are hundreds of thousands of embryos that are, like I said, thrown away because in vitro fertilization, that's what it calls for. The cells that aren't being used for infertile women, they get thrown away, they get discarded. So my question is, are you as outraged by that practice as you are abortion?
I don't like the fact, I mean, I do feel like women should be able to have their kids naturally. We do have to have a way.
Well, I would love that too, but sadly that's not the case.
Yeah. No, I know. But science has advanced in a way that women are able to have babies in another way. But for the in vitro, I mean, it's not, to me, that it's not in a mother's womb. It's like, I mean, honestly.
Well, the point of the in vitro is to put.
Yes. I mean, it depends on how you want to take this, though. Because from the Bible perspective, and something that I believe in as well, that if you're going to do something with the women, and I can't really go that way because we do use by birth control and things like that. But they were saying that a man should not ejaculate outside of a woman because he's wasting his seed. So honestly, that. So
are you outraged by that as well? Because technically speaking, it's tons of cells that are being essentially destroyed. So by that logic, if the abortion procedure is murder, then ejaculation and masturbation are also murder.
No, but think about it. So wait, go back, hold on. So don't forget, abortion is termination of a pregnancy. In that petri dish, when that embryo is there waiting to be placed into a uterus, it isn't in the uterus. So there's no murder, there's no pregnancy. There is an outrage. It isn't necessarily right because that.
Well, it's the destruction of cells. So they're the same thing.
It's the destruction of cells. But you know what's on our skin? So every day we lose dead skin cells. We use every day, like dust is made up of, I think dust is 89 or 80 something % of just dead skin cells. So in our skin cells, they're always reproducing. So we never see the dead skin cells that we're not really using. Our skin is always spraying up new stuff. That's spraying new stuff. So with
right, and we never pay attention to that or talk about that. Why is it
we don't.
only for abortion?
Because abortion is you're terminating an already. So think about it. When conception
but it's the same
happens,
concept.
It isn't the same concept. I don't think it's the same concept. I don't think it's the same concept. So the embryos, they're waiting in this dish to be placed into a uterus. Abortion is a successful, already happening pregnancy. The women and the men who decide to give their eggs and give their sperm and to have those dishes together, that's their choice to donate their eggs, to donate their sperm, to be placed inside of a woman so a fertilization can happen so she can have a successful pregnancy. Once a woman who is now pregnant, whether she thinks the baby will have a full-term birth or not, now that she's pregnant, that uterus has now received a embryo, and she goes a month or two and says, oh, I don't want it. Now she's terminating an already established pregnancy. That embryo in that dish isn't an established pregnancy. It's an embryo in a dish. So
there's a big time difference as well. We're talking about from the very beginning when it's the clump of cells, like I mentioned earlier, and when it fully forms into a human. That's the distinction that we need to make. And I agree. I think you're right. Yeah, it is different at that point, but from the very beginning, it's the same thing. And I'll even go one up. I mean, honestly, even like I said earlier, even if it becomes a fully formed human, it can feel the pain. I'm still fine with the abortion. I think that it's ultimately up to the women. That's it. I mean, and that's the other thing that I'm curious about. Why exactly are pro-lifers? And I actually there was something that I wanted to touch up on in response to what Alicia said about the Bible. Alicia, can you tell me what exactly the Bible says about abortion, whether it be the Old Testament or New Testament? Do you have a clear idea? Where does God mention that abortion is bad? Does he ever mention that?
Because he breathes life through children. So when we are aborting our children, we're kind of like.
I'm asking for specific scriptures.
Oh, I don't have a specific scripture.
I got her back.
But there is something. I don't have it. Like I said, I'm not really. I know of the Bible, but I don't go deep into it like that to actually know the scripture. But what I can tell you is that he does state that we're destroying his kings and his prophets that were supposed to be here when women do abort children. And that's why I feel like we're going through this spiral that we're going through right now, because there's a lot of babies that are being murdered right now because of men, because of people not wanting to take responsibility.
And furthermore, Joelle, so I'll give you a few of them. One of the Ten Commandments is do not murder. That's one of them. And the other one in Jeremiah 29:11 says, I formed you. It's Jeremiah 1, but it says, I formed you in your mother's womb. Before I even knew you, I formed you. I, as in God, I formed you in your mother's womb. So if he himself formed a child, allowed conception to happen in the womb of the mother, why would he be that same God to destroy that child? So if he created the child, why would he be the one to advocate to destroy the child, to destroy the pregnancy? Because he's the one who gives life. He gives life. So it's like saying he gives life, and then he takes away life.
Well, two things. Number one, abortion is not murder. So that part you said about how in the Ten Commandments it says do not murder, I don't consider abortion murder.
But you said terminate. But earlier you said termination of a pregnancy. A pregnancy has the potential to become a human. So if you terminate a pregnancy, that's terminating a human being. That's murder. You're terminating somebody.
Well, terminating a pregnancy is not the same as murder.
So pregnancy isn't. But when you get pregnant,
that's why you get double homicide. Then, like you said, when a murderer shoots a woman and her baby in the womb, why do they get murder? Double murder.
Oh, well, again, that is an interesting one because I agree. I think that's weird. I don't like that. I don't agree with that. It can't, like I said, the law is very inconsistent. Let's put it that way. I don't agree with that law. I think it's silly. I don't think that killing a live, walking woman who actually has a conscious, cognitive abilities, I think that is not the same as murdering, again, a clump of cells.
But you even said that
I think that you can sue. I think you can sue. Like if anything happens, like if a woman gets into an accident or she slips and falls and she loses her baby, I think
Mm-hmm.
people are liable for that. But
You think you
why
think the
would they
woman should be charged with murder?
The woman should be charged with murder
If she slips and falls and it's an accident?
No. I'm saying if she loses her baby, like if a woman loses her baby, she can like file a complaint to wherever and say that, hey, I lost my baby because I slipped and fell. Or if
I'm
she gets
asking, you
into an
said they should
accident,
be
hey, I
charged.
lost my baby.
What are you
The
referring
people
to?
should be charged with murder. No, that I'm saying that they could sue.
Okay.
Because as a liability saying that, hey, I lost my child because of this. I'm mentally destroyed because I lost my baby because you didn't clean up the water off the floor. People have to pay for that. And why should the person have to pay for that if it's just a clump of cells?
Okay. Yeah. Hey, you know what? That's fair enough. I mean, that's your interpretation. I want to say though, again, that these like so-called arguments about how it's double murder. Oh, whether we consider it, again, this has been my position, whether we consider it a human or not, your position does not actually go against the pro-choice side. It's not an argument. It's just saying, well, it's considered double homicide, therefore it is a human, therefore it's murder. That's not quite how it works. Like I said, the termination of a pregnancy is not the same as murder. It's a lot different. And on top of that, let's just say, yeah, okay, you just aborted the baby, whatever. It is murder, but you know what? I think it's justified. I think it's self-defense. When you defend yourself from somebody who
Self-defense
could, I
from
don't
what?
know,
Self-defense
potentially
from
murder
what?
you. Hold on.
What?
Well, hold on. I'm trying to explain. So when you are defending yourself from somebody who's trying to, let's say, murder you, that is considered self-defense. You ladies know that. You live in Florida. We have pretty good laws regarding that. To me, that fetus is the same as somebody who could potentially murder you. I think it's self-defense. You're defending yourself from that fetus because it could cause you bodily harm and it could cause you very long-term effects. And the science very clearly says that. And also, very quickly, before we get off to something else, in regards to what the Bible has to say, now you were saying earlier, Grace, about how God put the baby in you or something. That's fine. And then Alicia didn't really give me any scriptures or anything that God says about abortion. None of those things that you ladies mentioned regard abortion. I would like to say, if you actually look at some verses, I actually have some verses here quoted that may actually be in favor of the pro-choice side, or at least if they're not meant to be pro-choice, they come off that way. And I think that using religion in the Bible, biblical scripture, as a reason to be pro-life, I think is a very flawed position. So, for example, in Exodus 21, verse 22-25, it specifically says a pregnant woman who is injured and aborts the fetus warrants financial compensation only to the husband, suggesting that the fetus is actually property, not a person. And if you actually look at Numbers 5:11-31, it also says the gruesome priestly purity test to which a wife accused of adultery, cheating, of course, must submit will cause her to abort the fetus if she is found guilty of said adultery, including that the fetus does not have a right to life. So if we're going to talk about, and then there's many more I have here as well, but if we're going to talk about the religious context and that being a reason for being pro-life, I don't think that position holds much merit, quite frankly.
All right. So, Joel, so the two verses you mentioned, the first one you mentioned from Exodus, I want you to read me that verse again, because there's a big difference here. See, many people have a religion. They follow the practices of their particular choice of faith, but where we stand, it isn't just a religion, it's a relationship that we have with Christ and with God Almighty. So when someone tells me they know verses or they read a verse to me that favors or may seem to favor their particular side, my biggest thing is, do they understand? Do they have a relationship with God? So someone can refer and reference scriptures but have no relationship. That's part of a religion. I'm not a part of a religion. I'm part of a faith.
Well, it specifically mentions fetuses. And also, there's more to it as well. I mean, if you take a look, back when Jesus lived in the Roman Empire, there was a herb known as silphium, And silphium was an extremely popular herb in the Roman Empire, so much so that it was actually used in the making of their currency, and it actually went extinct because of how popular it was. And the purpose of silphium was actually used as a contraceptive to prevent pregnancy and to destroy any existing pregnancies. So these were all things that existed and were used for those reasons.
Because it's in the Bible, it doesn't mean it's the will of God. There's a lot of things in the Bible. There's a lot of things in the Bible.
Well, it was written by his disciples.
By his disciples, and if you look at it I think it's in 1 Timothy, but it says that the entire Bible is the breath of God. So the entire Bible is of God. When you pull out scriptures like the ones you mentioned about the herb and the one you mentioned about the killing.
Well, the herb wasn't a scripture, but yeah.
Oh, that's just
a fact.
That's just a fact. Okay. So those things you mentioned, what you mentioned is not necessarily wrong, but you have to think about it. Is that what God's will were? If you look at the beginning, just throughout the Bible.
I don't know. I'll be honest. I don't believe in God. I don't. I never try to use God or religion as a way to justify my position. I don't use it as a way to justify my position. That's the difference. Because I think that's silly.
Okay, so if you don't believe in God, then there's no really need for you to use the Bible as reference points for this particular debate.
Well, I would argue the same for the pro-life people. I don't think there's a reason for them to use their scripture or the word of God as their reason.
But
whether they believe in God or not.
But many of us, and that's why we stand so strong on particular views. It's because we have a relationship in God and we believe in God. So our values and our precepts isn't of our own. It isn't our free will. It isn't just our liberal will. It's because we have submitted to the God that we believe in. So
and that's fine. That's your prerogative.
And that's where we come together in many things, but that's where a great divide is in society. Many of us conservatives, we're not perfect, and we're not professing to be perfect by all means, but we submit to the precepts.
Of course, no one made that claim.
Yeah, so we're submitting to the precepts that he stands on, that God stands on, that he advocates for. Whatever he says in his word, we pretty much believe in that, and we have a relationship. None of us are on scale 10, but we have a relationship with him. So we advocate for the things he advocates for. So we want to do things because we want to. We want to go in.
and again, I want to say that's your prerogative. That's your constitutional right to express your freedom of religion as guaranteed by the First Amendment. I am not trying to take that away from you at all. I am just saying I simply disagree with the notion that, God or a mystical being, no offense, I don't mean that in a disrespectful way. I mean that with all due respect. I don't think that should be dictating the laws of the land. I just don't. I think that we should be able to make our own decisions and think critically about these things and come to our own conclusions. That's what I think. And again, even if you try to use the argument about God, again, the history contradicts what the current pro-life movement stands for, in my opinion.
Well, thinking about that verse that you just brought up, he was stating that because when a woman cheats, he was saying to abort the baby then, because you have to understand the context before all of that. The thing is that we're supposed to be living in a way that a man is supposed to be with a woman and a woman is supposed to be with a man. We're not supposed to be out there seeing other people outside of our relationship. So when he's saying that when you commit to one person, you shouldn't be going out there being with somebody else, because he bounded you two together. You said you made a commitment before God, or a vow before God, that this is your partner and this is who you're going to be with. And when you go out there and you commit adultery, then yeah, that's what he's saying as far as abortion. But the thing is that we shouldn't even have to take that route. Those are just those are just some of the groundwork that you just have to lay down. Like before we get to abortion, let me tell you all of this, that you need to make sure before you actually get to this place. And that's what I feel like the Bible is saying.
Well, it's interesting because, I mean, there's no biblical justification for the anti-abortion stance. And in fact, judging from just a few scriptures that I've read, it seems like it goes against, and kind of what Grace was saying earlier about the 10 Commandments, thou shalt not murder, but murder is everywhere in the Bible. It seems like God has a pretty monstrous history with murder. And I don't think that we should be using that. Again, and here's the other thing. I'm sorry, I'll let you respond, and then I'll follow up with what I was going to say.
Well, that's going down a rabbit hole, honestly. So I think we should just, I don't want to say we won't talk about it because we can
No,
talk
hey,
about
you know
it.
what?
We can do that.
I hear
but
you loud and clear.
it's on the topic. It's off the topic from abortion.
Right,
So
and I hear you loud and clear
talking
because
about that part,
the thing is, and this is actually, I'm so glad you said that because I actually was going to say something about that. So this is one of those things when it comes to the religion position. There's so many, and you ladies know this. There are so many factors that contribute to these positions. It's not that simple, right? The answers aren't crystal clear all the time. And when it comes to the religious argument, it's kind of like you either agree or disagree. Obviously, somebody who believes in God is more likely to use that as a way to justify their position, as opposed to someone like me who doesn't believe in God, who doesn't necessarily believe that he has, or it, if you will, again, with all due respect, not trying to be like a cringe atheist or anything, but I don't think that it has the I don't think it should have a say in what us humans do. It's imaginary. It's faith. That's what faith is. Faith is not physical. But the science, the data, all of that is physical. We can see that with our own eyes. And I'll get into the science as well in a moment about why abortion is good, if you'd like to get into that, because I know you said that we're probably not going to go anywhere with the religious part. And I agree. I think we should just agree to disagree there.
Yes, that's perfectly fine. That's perfectly fine. I did want to ask, I think you already mentioned this pretty strongly already, Joelle, but do you believe that the advocacy of the unborn strips away the rights of a woman, which you pretty much made clear in the very beginning, that you do believe that speaking up for the unborn or for the pump of cells is invasion of women's rights?
So yeah, I think if you are going to put into law and anti-abortion, legislature, yeah, I think that is a violation of the woman, absolutely. Because I think that the rights of the woman bearing the, embryo or fetus, whatever, depends on the time, of course, takes precedence over said fetus/embryo.
Now, what about the woman who may have had an abortion and deeply regret it? I wonder
that
what
happens.
Yeah, it has happened many times. I wonder what kind of care. What do you think about those women who they were for abortion? They were for abortion. They had the abortion. Now they live in regret every day because of their abortion, and they're still traumatized.
I think that sucks. I don't think that's. I think it's awful, and this actually kind of supports my point earlier, which was that it's a traumatizing thing. It's not something, because here's the thing, pro-lifers, once again, not saying you ladies in particular, but from what I've seen, I know a lot of conservatives, I know a lot of staunch pro-lifers, a lot of them, how do I put this? So the position,
Yeah, we're talking about.
I'm trying to think of how to say this, just because I just want to be careful how I word this, because again, it's true that people do, they do go through these types of things. And like I said, the problem with the pro-lifers is that they paint the pro-choicers as these evil baby killers, baby murderers. I mean, we get called every name in the book. I mean, we may as well be Satan himself. Like, we're considered evil. We're grouped into this big category of, Democrats. All the Democrats, their platform is about killing babies and all this stuff. It's very hard to have a civilized conversation about this when your side is constantly getting demonized and being called the worst names in the book. Because calling somebody a baby murderer or baby killer, those are some pretty serious claims that warrant lots of prison time. So I don't really feel too comfortable with that label, quite frankly. And I think that's something that pro-lifers don't seem to. No, I'm getting to it. I'm getting to it. Now, with that being said, in response to what you said about how women who may have been pro-abortion, regardless of what they may have felt beforehand, they actually went through with it, they got the abortion, and then down the line, they feel bad. That's true. That does happen. However, the science actually states, and these are facts, you can look them up, it's verifiable evidence, women who are actually denied abortions are more likely to initially experience higher levels of anxiety, lower life satisfaction, and lower self-esteem compared with women who received an abortion. So the studies and the science directly contradict the idea that, well, we should be, it's a whataboutism is what it's called. What
Mm-hmm.
about the women who did get the abortion and now they feel terrible after it?
Mm-hmm.
That sucks. I
Mm-hmm.
acknowledge that. That's a real big thing, which again, it's a traumatizing thing. It's not easy.
Mm-hmm.
But again, the science clearly states that women who are denied access to the abortion, they tend to be a lot more, they tend to have the bad end of the stick at the end over women who are actually able to get that abortion. So the science, like I said, says it's a fact. And this is verifiable from the American Psychological Association, which is a very credible source.
Now, what I also believe is that I believe that the women who may have, and I believe this with my whole heart, I do believe that, and I can look this up and I'll go ahead and Google it, but I believe that the women who have been denied an abortion for whatever reason, yeah, it's even hard for me to think about how many women have been denied an abortion with the abortion rate we have now, rate we have now. It's hard for me to picture how many women have actually been denied an abortion. But the ones who have been denied an abortion, I'm picturing, what happened after then? Did they actually have birth? Did they actually give, birth to their child? And if they gave birth to their child, how many of those women were thankful that they were actually denied that abortion? So I'm curious to see those numbers, and I don't know if it's there, but you can send me that link. But I'm curious to see, because what I'm thinking in my heart is this, and I know that it happens because we have already had regrets, and then end up being grateful that that situation happened worked out for our good. So what I'm seeing is a woman pregnant, maybe low income, the father isn't around. She goes to the clinic. She's ready for the abortion. They deny her the abortion. She's upset. Maybe she's angry. Maybe the survey was taken. Maybe the survey was taken maybe a week or a few days after she went to the clinic and was denied the abortion. She goes home. She thinks about her life for the next 2 months and says, "Okay, I'm ready to have my baby. I'm not as in this anxiety state as I once was when I was first denied the abortion." So I'm really curious as to what regards that survey was taken when it asked those women, how did you feel when you were denied that abortion? Because my thing is, not all women, I do know a few women personally who have felt disconnected from their child once he or she was born. I do. There was
Which
one
happens a lot more than you think.
It happens a lot. She was very disconnected. She didn't want the child. He had a few medical issues, and he still has a few issues now with his life. But now she thank God that she didn't abandon him for a few months. She was tending to him, but she wasn't playing with him. She wasn't caressing him. She wasn't nurturing. She didn't click that nurturing instinct as a mother wasn't clicking for her. But I believe that those women who were denied, and I want to look at the numbers for this, but I believe that those women who were denied the abortion, when they actually seen their child face, and once they actually, was able to embrace and kiss and give birth to their child, that they were grateful that they were denied that. I have heard the stories about women who have to have regrets from the abortion. I've heard the stories. I think there's a few organizations about the women who have, they were going to get an abortion and they didn't. My mom was one of them. My mom had 6 kids. I am the last of the 6 of them. And my third brother, Damien, he was conceived in a one-night stand. And her option was abortion, and she had the papers ready for it. She had the papers, the pamphlet ready to abort them, and she was driving my grandma's car, who's now deceased. She's driving my grandma's car. She leaves the papers of the abortion clinic and everything in my grandma's car. My grandmother sees it and says, what's going on with this? And she didn't tell my mother don't get an abortion. My mom, she was a full-blown adult. She didn't tell her don't get an abortion. But I think when my grandma just brought her attention, like, I see what's going on. Like, what's going on? She kept my brother. My brother has no defects. His father is fine. He has children, and she thanks God every day. When we talk about all this politics and legislation in Congress and Democrat Party platform and what they stand for, she always just reminds us how thankful she was that she didn't have that abortion. And she was so set on having that abortion. She had a boy already. She had a girl already, no husband, no financial income, no career. She had every quote unquote means and reasons to get an abortion. She was also in drugs. Another reason she had every means to get an abortion, quote unquote. But she didn't, and she thanks God for it. And now she's really grateful. So I see the numbers, I hear the numbers you tell me, but it's really hard for me to wrap my mind around that. It really is hard. It's hard for me to wrap my mind around the women who answered that survey. Now, I'm curious to know when they entered that survey. And it's hard for me to believe that it's hard to me to believe that they're still living in there. They're living in anxiety or some kind of traumatizing life right now because they were denied access to an abortion. That's hard for me to believe. But I hear you loud and clear. It's hard for me to believe that.
Right. That was a lot. Grace, do you have any children by chance? I don't mean that in like a smug way.
No, I have 0 children, but I have nieces and nephews. I've been around kids since I was.
But you've never had to bear a child. I imagine if you ended up getting pregnant, you would stick to your conviction and not abort. I would imagine.
Conviction. It's not to me. It isn't even conviction. It's a joy to conceive. I never conceived yet, but it's a joy I look forward to one of these days. But I haven't conceived yet.
Right. I'm saying if you were to get pregnant, though, I assume that you would stick with your principle and not abort, right?
Really?
You would be happy. Okay,
Absolutely.
Good, and that's good for you. Now, I'm gonna sound very insincere here.
No, come on.
But listen, that story. I know a lot of people because I do speak to a lot of pro-lifers. I've seen them online. Most of the time that has something to do with it. Personal anecdotes. Mm-hmm. When a person goes through something personally, of course it's going to, impact their view on it a little bit more, whether it's for the, again, pro-life or the pro-choice side. One way or another, those personal experiences, at least ones that are as, that can be as traumatizing as that, they do have an impact on people, and it does make them think, well, you know what, I basically narrowly escaped death. I understand, I don't want this to happen to anybody else. I'm very thankful to be alive. I'm so glad they didn't abort. I'm so happy. That's great. And this is where it gets a little insincere.
Okay.
It's a personal anecdote. So in other words, you and your family, with all due respect, are not the only people
Absolutely.
in this country.
Absolutely.
So there's tons of other circumstances where a woman should get the abortion because it will benefit her. And to be fair, again, this is where the kind of harsh part comes. If you had been aborted, or your family member that you mentioned had been aborted, you wouldn't be here. You wouldn't know it. So now you can speak on it because you're alive, which is why it's always so funny to me when I hear pro-lifers use the argument, isn't it funny how the people who are pro-choice are already alive? It's like, no, not really, man, because if you weren't born, you would not know. You would not exist. So you wouldn't be able to have that position.
That's all of us. If none of us exist, we wouldn't know anything. But we do exist, and we do have issues before us. Yeah, so that's a big.
And there's a lot of people. And by the way, just real quick, I'd be happy to send you the study from the American Psychological Association. It actually contains the sources on the bottom. So I'd definitely be happy to send you that when we're finished here.
That's fine.
So yeah. So basically, again, back to the science though, the actual data, because that's the meat and potatoes of this entire conversation, in my opinion. Religion aside, ethics aside, I don't think that religion and ethics should be. I don't think that they should be determining factors in this, because every person's situation is different. So to put everybody in this umbrella to say, oh, abortion is murder, abortion is irresponsible, you can't speak for everybody. You haven't been through it. Bearing a child is a lot of work. It's extremely stressful. My cousin just had a baby 2 days ago, her second one. So I know what it's like. I saw her in her bed throughout these 9 months because they live very close. So we visit them every weekend. She was in a lot of pain. It hurts. She had her first child. She had a C-section. I mean, these are, again, traumatizing things that can happen that women don't want to deal with. And it's very frightening. So again, if we could just put the ethics argument aside and just look at the facts, the facts, not the feelings. Now, I know Ben Shapiro, classic, facts don't care about your feelings, right? Yeah. That's overplayed, but this is one of those cases where the facts really just don't care, because the facts show, and I'll start going off on this. I'll try to break it down because I want to give you a chance to respond as well. But again, women who are denied an abortion, studies have shown, are more likely to deal with pain later on in life, anxiety, unhappiness with their life. A child is a lot of work, as we all know. And it could be very, very stressful, especially when you don't have the financial means to support that child. A lot of it is economic, in my opinion. And again, the facts support this, and I'll get to that. Also, unwanted pregnancies have actually been associated with deficits to the child's cognitive, emotional, and environmental, social processes. I mean, these kids are a lot more likely to deal with negative long-term outcomes later on in life, like increased likelihood of engaging in criminal behavior, dependence on government assistance, which I know that conservatives hate. I know conservatives are all about pulling themselves up by the bootstraps. So if that's the case, with that logic, maybe we should give maybe we should give access to abortion more readily. And they also are more likely to have an unstable marriage because, sad to say, sometimes couples they break up, they get divorced because they were not ready for this child. And then that leads to a lot of times, statistically speaking, that child is likely to believe that it's their fault. I don't know about you, but I don't want anybody to have to deal with that sort of pain or trauma. It affects everybody.
So kill it?
But I would say in this situation, like, I feel like taking it away will make people think more before they actually go out and commit the act. Like I said, we have all of these ways of going about not being able to have a child. There's so many ways that we could go about not having a child. Why
so you honestly believe that promoting abstinence and telling people to just be more responsible, that's going to lower abortion?
Because you're not going to have it. Because you're not going to have an abortion. Abortion is not going to be there. If at any time, at the end of the day, everybody is an adult. At the end of the day, when you go into that bedroom, what you're doing when you walk into that bedroom. You have the choice at that time to not go there and lay there and make that child. And after you sit there and you make that child, you better have the money to go and get a plan B if you cannot afford that child. So if you don't want
where are they going to get that money, Alicia? Are they just supposed to throw it on a tree?
It's unfortunate. Oh, well.
But if they can't make the money,
if you cannot accept the consequences, then don't sit there and lay down and have the baby. Now, I'm going to get very personal real quick, and I know this is going to go on Facebook or whatever, but I had an abortion, so I know what it's like. My baby's picture, it was about 3 to 6 weeks when I did have the abortion. I still have the picture of my baby in there that I was supposed to have. My baby's supposed to be around 5 or 6 years old right now. And I keep my baby in there, and I was like, this is something that I regret. Me and that child's father walked into the abortion clinic together. We made this decision together. And I don't want to make it sound like all sweet or whatever. We walked in, we had an abortion together. But it was something that I can say that I didn't have to go through alone. It was something that we made that decision on together. And I keep my child with me. I do still have that little picture, and it was a lesson learned. Now, for people to sit here and say that, oh, well, people can just go have an abortion willy-nilly, like, oh, well, I got pregnant again, I can go have another.
Well, again, it's not willy-nilly, as I mentioned earlier.
Yes, it is. You have people out here screaming. No, you have women out here screaming, I had 7 abortions. So what? So what? Oh, I can go and have more. So what? So what? That's not what abortion is for. Abortion is be there. If we're going to talk about having it, we can sit here and say, okay, well, oops, I made a mistake. It's not going to happen again, which is something that happened for me. That I feel like, even though I made that mistake, I do regret my mistake wholeheartedly. Like I said, that was a while ago, and I still hold on to my baby's pictures because I do regret it. That was something that I was very wrong for doing, and I regret it. But I was glad that me and the dad was able to come together and do that together. I regret it.
No, of course, and I'm sorry to hear that. I mean, but again, 2 things. I was trying to say earlier about how you keep saying this thing willy-nilly. Like, it's like, again, people are just like, oh, screw it, I'm just going to have as many abortions as I want. I mean, if you're determined, if your positioning is, if your argument is based off of a few people who are radical leftists on the streets, on pro-choice marches, who are just trying to piss off conservatives and pro-life people, then that argument doesn't hold much merit. I'm providing real
That's it.
data that's actually
I am
saying.
providing real statistics
And also,
because I live.
again, you keep saying willy-nilly, which is contradictory to what you just told me your experience was. You just said it too. It wasn't willy-nilly. It was a very tough decision. Now, I could easily say, Alicia, you're a hypocrite because you are on the pro-life side and you support candidates in Congress that want to restrict abortion when you had one. And on top of that, I would like to ask you as well, and I'm not shaming you. I'm not a hypocrite. I think that, and this is what I want to ask. My question is, now, answer honestly. This isn't like a gotcha or anything. I am genuinely curious. Would you say, I know you were saying that you feel guilty about it to this day, you and your man. That sucks. However, I would like to ask, do you think your life has been better as far as working, being able to work? Well, you have a kid right now, don't you?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, right. Okay, I totally forgot about that. Right. Okay, so let's just say from the time you had the abortion up until the time you had your first kid, did you notice anything different in that time? I'm just curious. And be honest.
What do you mean?
Like I said, I would like to know. Like, did you
anything different?
Like, did you feel like you had more opportunities? Like, you were more liberated? Like, now you can actually do things, And before you answer that, I would like to ask. I don't know if you already said this. Excuse me if you did. I don't want you to repeat yourself, but I may have missed it. Why did you get the abortion? What was this? What made you go? Yeah, you know what? This isn't gonna. I can't do this. What was the deciding factor, or factors?
The deciding factor at that time is that the person that I was with, his mother had just passed. He already had 2 kids at the moment.
Were you living with the mother?
No, I wasn't. His mom had just passed, and he had 2 kids, and it was something that we really did think about before, because I found out really quick, because obviously I'm a girl. I know when I'm supposed to have my cycle. So I found out really quick. So it was something that we sat down, we really talked about, we discussed, and we were just like, no, at this moment. He was more like, no, not at this moment. I really can't do it. And I was like, you know what? I get it. I understand what you're going through right now. I respect it. Honestly, it was his timing that I did respect, because
it was what?
It was more of his timing that I respected because of what he was going through.
But you had the ultimate say. You had the final say.
No, I don't feel like I have the final say, honestly, at the end of the day. I don't feel like I have the final say because, like I said, how I feel based off of it. And that's why when I got to talk to him, I don't want to say honored. I mean, just being able to sit down and like me and him being able to go in there together and walk in there together. There's not too many women that can say that. They actually have fathers or baby daddies, whatever you want to call them, and just say, oh, I don't want the baby, I don't care for it or whatever. Like, this was the decision. Like, honestly, and believe me or not, when I showed him the picture of our child that we were getting ready to abort, he walked out crying because
I bet.
It just wasn't something that he wanted to do. He just knew just at the moment it wasn't the right decision at that moment. So I was just like, you know what, I respect your wishes. I understand what you're going through. Don't want to really put a child on you like that. And my parents were going through a lot at their home as well, and that's who I was staying with. So I was like, yeah, right now it really wasn't a good time. But even with my child that I have right now, it wasn't a good time. But at the end of the day, there's always a way. There's always a way. There's always help. There's always all of these outlets that you can go to for help. Like there's food stamps or housing or all of these things that people can benefit from if they do have that, if they do have those opportunities.
And she isn't saying depend on it. She isn't saying depend on those systems. She's saying depend on those systems. But when you're in there, when pregnancy happens for those who are under just not having enough financial assistance, the resources are there. Our advocacy for government, for small government, is for you to depend on the system for a temporary time period. But what we've seen in our communities is that people have depended on the system for generations, and that to me is detrimental to the entire minority communities. But what she's saying with the program, if you need them, they're there for you. That's what government's supposed to be.
Right.
Be there for the people when they need you only, not for dependency. So we're not like we're not like, abolish all of the government programs. We're just saying that, use it for its purposes only. Don't abuse it. And what we've seen in our community is that people have grown
People
to be
abuse it.
comfortable and they abuse the system to the point where it's affecting and detrimenting their lives and their children's lives and their grandchildren's lives.
Well,
Now,
and that's also for me as well, where and you said that you don't see people screaming that they had all of these abortions, but in our neighborhoods, I personally know people
well, I didn't
that
say it
have
doesn't
had
happen.
I know people that have at least 5 to 7 abortions, and that's
And are they happy?
I don't want to say, I mean, they
You don't know,
seem
right?
happy, but in that,
Right.
listen, the guilt is there to know that you
Of
don't
course.
killed
I
about
mean,
five,
again,
five
you can
or
feel
six,
guilty
5 to
but
6 of
still
your
be
kids.
justified. You can feel guilty and still feel like what you did was justified. For example, again, if somebody breaks into my house and I shoot the dude dead, and I'm going to feel guilty that I killed somebody, but again, it was justified. Now, I don't want to get into the comparisons about, oh, well, that was a human who was causing harm. Right, we get that. I know that. That's obvious, okay? I'm not trying to play the, well, what about this? And, well, this is different, because they are virtually the same when you look at it in terms of principle. Now, I don't know if you were going to say something, Alicia, after that, because I was going to, because you ladies said a lot, and I'd like to unpack that a little bit, because I think it's kind of interesting what some of your, but the main things that I picked up was how, number one, Alicia was, you made the choice. Your man, kind of encouraged it in a way by saying he doesn't think that we're ready. You folks are ready. I'd like to talk about that just for a brief moment. What Grace said as well about the minority communities, I'll talk about that in a second as well, and then welfare. So, Alicia, your choice, isn't it beautiful to be able to do that? And I know it's a harsh practice, obviously. Nobody is saying that it's a good thing to have an abortion, although okay, let me rephrase that. Some people do say that because, again, when you look at the statistics, when you look at the data that actually, talks about these types of things, the data does show that women who, again, have access to the abortion have a much less likelier risk of feeling depressed later on. So that's that, okay? But you had the choice to do that. Statistically speaking, if you hadn't had the choice to abort the baby, you would have were statistically more likely to feel depressed and have major anxiety because of that. So I'd like to say maybe it was a good thing that you had the abortion. I'll leave it at that. The next thing I was going to talk about was the minority communities. Now, this is an interesting one because I constantly hear conservatives talk about the how abortion is killing our black babies and this is the number one cause and all that stuff. I don't want to get into specifics too much of all that because I think it's a misrepresentation of the data and a misrepresentation of the entire conversation. Because once again, the APA says that so the APA says that access to safe and legal abortion is actually central to attaining social equality for all women, but the laws that actually restrict access to a safe abortion actually are particularly harmful to women who are of, I think Grace mentioned this earlier, it's particularly harmful to low-income women, women of color, which of course is a minority, and sexual and gender minorities as well. I'm just saying, and this is also applicable to those who live in rural and medically undeserved areas. And this is all coming from the APA. So again, very credible source, outlines the studies very clearly. I can show you that again. But yeah, if we want to talk about harming the minority community, maybe we should start by addressing that.
Joe, what are you? I'm sorry, I have to ask really quick. What are you? Just to put that out on the table, because some people watch these things and they'll think that you're white. So what are you?
I'm Spanish. Well, I'm actually mixed. My mom tells me I'm part black. I don't know how accurate that is. I haven't done a DNA test or whatever those are called, the swabs. I forget what they're called. But I know for a fact I have Spanish in me, and I think I'm part white as well. But yeah, I'm mixed. I'm more than two races. That's what I put on my job applications.
No, you're good. You get some people like, oh, that white boy can't be talking about minorities.
I'm not a white liberal. I know conservatives hate white liberals, so no, I think it's just the lighting that makes me look white.
No, I knew you weren't white. I was like, he doesn't look white. But that's what they say. But go
Right.
ahead. Sorry.
I'm not bothered by the comments. Trust me. I've seen the comments on your threads. I don't mean to go off topic, but I've dealt with
No.
some of the people in your threads, and they're not the nicest people, so I can handle them. It's okay.
Me and you are cool.
No, of course. That's why I usually just haha react to all their comments because I don't really take it that seriously.
Yeah.
But yeah, no. So I mean, to continue, pick up where we left off. Access to abortion actually helps minority communities rather than hurts them, and this is verifiable. This is backed up by the science and the data. So again, I'll be sure to leave my sources once we're through here. But having access to an abortion is overall a positive thing for society, not necessarily a negative thing. And that's why I said earlier, if you want to talk about the ethics, okay, fine, we can talk about the ethics. Is it murder? Do you think so? Okay, fine. If you think it's murder, then vote for pro-life policy. If you don't think it's murder and you think that it's something that should be accessible for a woman to have, then vote for pro-choice policy. This is a topic, and this is why, in my opinion, the pro-choice versus pro-life argument will never die. I think this is one of those few topics that's always going to be talked about because there's just so many factors that contribute to both sides, and it's very hard to come to a conclusion. And I knew that we weren't going to, turn each other over, but I am fascinated to hear your side of it, and I'm also wanting to give my side of it as well. So again, abortion, to leave off with that, and I have another point to add as well, depending on what Alicia says here, but I think that it's a good thing for society as a whole.
Well, I just wanted to say that, so I don't know if you're ready to for the next part of it, but how do you feel as far as men being on child support? Do you think that should be taken away?
Say that again.
Do you believe that men should know, let's just say if we're going to go ahead, we can do these abortions, but men can no longer be on child support?
Okay. Are you asking if I'm okay with that?
Are you okay with that? That's what I was asking.
That's not really a position that I've thought too strongly about. I would be winging it if I tried to answer that, in good faith. So I'm gonna have to.
I'm winging this whole thing, so.
I'm gonna have to plead the fifth on this one because I don't know enough about that to give my informed opinion.
Well, what is it? Well, basically, Joe, come on now. I know that pretty much basically if a woman decides that she wants to have a baby, if a woman decides that she wants to have a baby and the guy says, no, I can't afford a baby right now, basically my situation, if it would have went left, and I would have had the baby and said, okay, well, I'm going to just go ahead and put you on child support. And that kind of, I don't even want to say kind of, it definitely destroys men. Because I've seen some men go on child support for one child and have to pay $700 a month for one child. So, but on the other hand, let's just say that this guy, he's really wanted this child. He's been wanting a child for a really long time, and then his model wife or whatever, she's at the highlight of her career, and she decides that, you know what, I don't want to get pregnant right now. I can't have this baby right now. I want to get an abortion. And the guy's like, well, I've waited so long for this child. Can we have the child?
So are you asking me, do I think that the male, so if the male wants it but the woman does it, should the man be the one that's solely responsible for it?
No, should the woman still have the baby and let the man care for it?
Well, I think it's her choice, ultimately. So no matter what the man says, even if he begs and pleads and cries and gets on his knees, I think that the woman should have the option to say, yeah, I'm sorry you feel this way, but I'm going to have it anyway because I don't want to have this baby. I think it's as simple as that.
And the man should have the option to say that, all right, well, cool, I don't want to take it.
He should have a say. The farthest that he should have a say in is, does he want it or not? After that, as far as whether he has more power, more leverage over the final decision than the woman, I don't think that that's how it should be. I think that even if the man does want it, then well, that's too bad. And I know that sounds cruel, but
right,
too bad.
But that's what I'm asking is that, so if the woman decides that she wants to go ahead and keep the baby, but the man is saying that he doesn't want it, the woman can throw him on child support. But if the man wants it and the woman's saying, no, I don't want this baby right now.
I see.
she gets to abort the baby.
I see. So
So
basically,
how does that work?
so would I feel the same way if the woman wanted to keep the baby, but the father didn't want to keep it?
Right.
Right. Yeah, she can still have the baby. Now, as far as whether we should put the father on child support, I don't know about all that. I mean, if it helps, I guess. You can't force that, of course, though. I mean, in a perfect world, if a woman has a child and the father doesn't want anything to do with it, I will go as far as to say the woman should probably try to raise that child on her own, whether it's through assistance from the government, which I'm going to get to next. But yeah, if she wants to have that baby and the dad doesn't want to, then, okay, fine. But the woman better be the one that comes up with the plan. She better be the one that has everything set out and not just expect the man to do everything. That's my opinion. I'm sure that there's counter arguments that could be said for that are much more intellectual. But that's my position. I want to keep it fair. I stand by the principle that the woman has the final say, even if that means it could potentially hurt the father, so to say. But again, in a perfect world, the father should be able to just say, yeah, no, I have no, I don't want anything to do with this kid. I don't want to, I don't want to associate with it. I don't want to make payments because I didn't agree to this. Yeah, I think that if that's the case, okay. Again, if the woman feels that strongly about it, then she's going to have to figure out something.
Do you have any children?
I do not, no.
Is it because the woman is actually carrying the baby that you give her so much power to do whatever she chooses?
Yes, that's a big part of it, at least, yeah. Because nobody knows exactly how it feels except for the person bearing the pregnancy. So nobody can really, especially if you're a man, you will never understand that type of pain, that type of, long 9 months. You're never going to know what that's like. It's easy for you to open your mouth and say, well, I want it. Okay, that's great. Well, you don't really, I mean, if you want it, great, but the woman who's bearing the child is the one that's going to have to deal with most of the repercussions afterwards. So I value her final say, and yes, I do give it that. I give that much power to it. Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like we should just take away both.
Take away what?
Take away abortion and take away child support and make both sides.
Well, you have to understand that there's a lot of people.
That's just how I feel about the situation.
Well, there's a lot of people who rely on child support, though, and by taking that away, you're basically letting them starve, and because they're not going to have any money. I mean, life is hard enough as it is. It's not like the government gives a ton of money. Most of the guys don't pay their child
support anyway. So.
Well, right, and I'm aware of that. Oh, hold on. I'm aware of that as well. But, I mean, that's a whole different conversation about abortion and child support. I'm talking about the practice of abortion and whether it is a positive for society or a negative for society. Now, most pro-lifers think it's negative for whatever reason, because the science and data directly contradict the pro-life arguments most of the time. Also, one thing I did want to mention, because I was going to talk about welfare a little bit more, but aside from, but to put that on the back burner for a moment, I also want to say something that, in response to something that Alicia said earlier, which was in regards to contraceptives and how there's a lot of ways to prevent the pregnancy and stuff like that. Now, Alicia, you would identify as a Republican, right?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. That's fine. But the data, once again, directly contradicts the Republican stance on abortion. So it's actually true, and I can send you this as well, that states that don't have proper sex education actually have the most teen pregnancies. So in states like New Mexico, Texas, Oklahoma, I believe it's 1 out of 20 teenage girls give birth every year, and that's coming from census data from a few years ago. And Arkansas, which is a staunchly Republican state, actually has the highest rates at 56 teen births per 1,000 teenage girls. And the red states tend to have higher rates because the 7 states with the highest, which are Republican states, don't actually require schools to teach things like contraception and proper sex education. Some of the states actually don't even require it at all. So a lot of these kids don't know. In other states, it's true. This is statistically proven. Other states that actually do have some sort of sex education curriculum implemented that actually requires teachers to that actually teaches children about things like contraceptives and things like Plan B and protection and all those things actually have lower rates of teen pregnancy because the children are actually being educated. Therefore, they are more cautious when they are going to have sex. So that's a given fact. And there are in a lot of these states that I mentioned that are red states predominantly, they actually have certain sex education programs in place, but the teachers are stressed. I mean, they are essentially forced, whether they believe it or not. They're forced to stress abstinence and advise children to, quote unquote, wait until marriage. And that phrase, wait until marriage, I don't like. And I think that just plays into the religious argument again, because what other doctrine aside from the Bible says that you need to wait until marriage to have sex? So again, the data shows that states that have comprehensive sex education and actually educates children on these types of things while they're young, instead of treating sex education like it's some sort of scary monster that's going to, quote unquote, indoctrinate the kids, maybe we should give it a chance, because based on the statistics, it seems to work pretty well at reducing abortions. And I'll say this, my final thought on that is, if conservatives and pro-lifers alike truly cared about reducing abortions, which I know you do, they would actually look at the statistics and they would stop voting for Republican Congress people to put into law things that go against the statistics and the science. That would be the first way to make sure that we can limit abortions. It would be great if we can bring it down to zero. Most likely that's never going to happen. But if we can reduce it by teaching our kids about safe sex and contraceptives and how to do things the right way, maybe we'll actually see a reduction in teen pregnancies, which would avoid things like abortion from having to happen in the first place.
Well, you can kind of
because just when President Barack Obama became president, there was a program.
I'm sorry, Grace, I can't hear you too well. You sound far away.
Is it better now?
Yeah, I can hear you. Your webcam went off though. Now it's Alicia, but yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Can you see me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Can you see me as well?
Yeah.
There was when Obama became president, there was I don't know if it was an act. I think it was an act, but there was a program where abstinence was taught. I can't think of the program, but abstinence was taught, and I know of two of the workers who was actually running the program in Tennessee. And once he became president, and what it was an abstinence program. They talked about contraception and how to remain abstinent, and of course they would go through the importance of abstinence, and if you did happen to feel the urge to have sex, and if you did have sex, here's not giving them physical contraception, but here are the precautions you want to be aware of if you do engage in these activities. We teach you abstinence, but here's what happens if you choose to do that anyway. That program, I can't think of the name of it exactly, but it did exactly what you're talking about in Tennessee. And when Obama became president, those programs they were stripped away. I don't know which particular states. I think you mentioned a few states. I don't know.
Yeah, I talked about a couple of them who are predominantly Republican control.
So I wonder.
Well, I honestly feel like they're all like, this is what I wanted to say. Because if you notice, if you can actually sit back and like look through time on how young people started to get pregnant, like a lot of like my parents or their parents, they didn't have their kids until they were older. From what I've seen, from what it looks like, they didn't have their kids until they were older. So now it's like, now kids now are having more kids at 13, 14. I mean, just whenever they're able to get pregnant, that's where teen pregnancies are starting. And the reason for that is because I feel like a lot of the stuff is being stripped out of the school. And I feel like that's when Obama came into office. Like,
what stuff is being stripped out of the school? Because you're right, but maybe I don't think we mean the same thing.
Well, as far as like sex education, like I remember our parents had to sign off on a document for us to watch anything in regards to sex. So there was sex education there. We used to take home little babies and things like that for home to make you prepare, like if you even thought about having a kid. And those are things that I think that we should put back for kids to even not even want to fathom the thought of even having a child.
So you agree? So are you supporting abstinence? Because it sounds like you're supporting my stance, which is that we should be teaching our children about these types of things so they know better.
Yeah. That's what, of course, yeah. That I feel like they should have those things back in school. They need to be back in school. So those things that I'm talking about, such as the abstinence or the sex training or whatever you want to call it, that they should have those in school. Those are very important to have, such as, you know, all of the other things that we used to have, such as sewing. We did have sewing, cooking classes. I don't even think they even have those in schools anymore, which are very important to kids when they're getting older. And they don't even have those things anymore. Now I think it's just reading and math and maybe PE, and that's about it.
So I want to go ahead and respond to that, and then we're going to have closing remarks. And Joel, I want you to mention the statistics you're holding on to and that you go by, and I want you to also mention the science you're holding on to. So the science, I want to hear your science perspective, why abortions, why you are pro-choice, and the statistics you're holding on to that make you stand as such an advocate for the rights, quote unquote, of women. But go ahead and give it your Alicia, and then go ahead and just give it the science and the statistics you're holding on to support your claim.
Well, right, and to say real quick about the science and statistics, I can't give you the exact numbers. They're there. It would take me a long time to go over all of it, though. It's very in depth and very detailed. It would be really hard for me to explain it in a simple way. But basically, one of my biggest sources for material and how I base my facts and opinions. Well, I base my opinions on facts that I see, and that includes the science and the data. I go to usually I go to the American Psychological Association, the APA. They are very, very credible, and they actually outline this stuff pretty great in their work that they've done. They've done lots of studies in regards to this. The same thing goes with the teen birth rates with the Republican states. All this stuff can be verified if you look it up online. It's Again, these are numbers that are coming from the CDC, the APA. I also like to use I like to do a lot of research on Ivy League schools as well that do numerous studies on these types of things, because their arguments are pretty in line with mine, and that's where I get my information from. So I usually get my information from the APA or high-level schools and college institutions. And I know Republicans, no offense, but I know Republicans are pretty anti-intellectual, and they think that Marxist professors are taking over the college campus. But that's not really true. I mean, if the facts and the science are more left-leaning, then that's just how it is. I mean, it's not our fault that the statistics play in our favor. So that's where I get all my information from. And yeah, I mean, again, just if you look at everything that I mentioned, the long-term effects it has on women, the power of choice, being able to make that decision for yourself and not letting the government tell you what you can and can't do with your body. I mean, like I said, all the data shows that even in other countries that have, countries that have made abortion illegal either have the same amount of abortions or even more. And this is, of course, verifiable evidence as well. So if, and Alicia said earlier, she agreed with me that we should bring back sex education and we should make it more, things like contraceptives more accessible to young people so they know what to expect. It's interesting because earlier she said that she thinks that abstinence and being quote unquote responsible is going to lead to the deaths. But I don't think she was, but she didn't mention the data that I mentioned. She just said that, well, people just want to sleep around. And I mean, no, it's a lot more nuanced than that. So that would be my final thoughts on the subject. I am pro-choice. I believe abortion should be something that is safe, legal, rare, if possible. And I think the only way to reduce the number of abortions is by teaching our children and the future generations the real truth and the real statistics about sex education. That's my final thought.
Thank you. All right, and Alicia, your final thoughts, including why you stand as a pro-life supporter.
Well, the reason why that I'm stating that I am pro-life is because, like I said, there's way too many options than before we actually get to abortion. Like we could take, like we should be able to make these contraceptives like more accessible to people for them to be able to get them. I feel like you should be able to, I feel like they should be there at the drugstore when you go get anything else, that should be something that is available to people, not something that's super expensive. And that's one of the reasons why I feel like if people feel that they have to go to abortion is because the way our society is, or the way that our economy is set up, and that is a whole different study. But I feel like if our economy got better, then people wouldn't have to worry about abortion. But like I said, just
That's
teaching them,
plausible.
as far as teaching them abstinence, teaching, at least letting them know about, hey, just if you do it, here is A, B, C, and D, and then you have a condom as well, just in case of anything. And then after that, just in case if that doesn't work, you still have plan B. But we still don't have to go and get abortions, is where I stand on. And I really want to go ahead and put back, like Joel said, sex education in schools. Like for me, when I personally have a son, and for me, what I want to do to teach my son to not have kids when he gets older is that eventually have another kid myself, or I do plan on to adopt, and I want him to take that steps in helping me raising that child, so he knows what it's like. Man, I'm not ready for a child right now. This takes a lot of work. And if you can instill that into a child, that's why there are some kids who don't, there are some adults who don't have kids for extended periods of time because they did have to take care of siblings and things of that sort. So that's just where I stand. I don't think that it's necessary. I feel like there's so many more options out there before you even have to fathom abortion.
There's a lot to respond to there, but of course we're running out of time, so I don't want to hold up, but agree to disagree. Well, I agree with most of what you said. I just think we have different ways of going about it, that's all.
Okay, so Alicia, I want you to tell her, not Jorge, tell Joel one thing you do like about what he said, or maybe something he said today, something that came out of his mouth today that you agree with, or that you understood where he's coming from. And then Joel, the same thing, share with Alicia something you gathered as useful from her, or something that you somewhat useful or understanding, something that she said where it was useful or understanding from your perspective. Alicia, go ahead and
absolutely.
Honestly, I think that, like what Joel said, we can agree to disagree to a certain extent. I feel like me and him both are like on the same page, but in a different way. Because correct me if I'm right, Joel, like I don't think that you want abortions there, but you feel like it is something that people should have access to. But if we could at least teach them, like we said that we agreed on the sex education part, if we could at least teach them to not go out there and just have sex all over the place and end up getting pregnant and start killing a lot of babies, then as long as we can teach them, we won't have to worry about that. But as long as we could still like have, I don't agree with this. I think that we shouldn't have abortion in general, but I can understand what Joel is saying, that it's something that, it should be there as a just in case.
All right, Joel.
I just a quick follow-up. Yes, pretty much hit the nail on the head there. In a perfect world, abortion wouldn't exist.
Right.
Most people don't think it's a good thing, okay? And even the ones that are chanting it out on the street, they're just trying to piss you off. And, it works a lot of times because, when you value life the way Alicia does, which I'm going to get into, it's easy to misinterpret that and to think that that's how we all feel. But those are just immature people who don't really care to have an actual discussion on the nuances of the subject, which is their own prerogative. They can do that, but we shouldn't be put under this big umbrella that we're just baby killers. But yes, in a perfect world, abortion wouldn't exist. It would be some other way, a less harmful way, But yeah, absolutely. I think that it should be available, and I think that based off the studies that have proven, time and time again, that comprehensive sex education does help reduce the number of abortions and teen pregnancies. So yeah, absolutely. That's my stance for the most part. And I would even go as far as to say I think it should be available even when there's no risk to the woman. And we discussed that earlier as well. Like I said, I'm staunchly pro-choice. That's just me, being honest. Now, as far as what I feel about Alicia, I will say I do admire your I admire your passion. I admire the fact that you're willing to speak your mind no matter what, even if we heavily disagree. I think that anybody that is willing to stick by their convictions is it's somewhat admirable, you know. So kudos to you for that, and also thank you for being honest about your own personal experiences as well, because a lot of people don't have the courage to come out and say what you said. So again, people can listen to that and go, oh well, she's a hypocrite, she just says that. We can change our minds. It happens. We can not like the act, you know, and do it, but you know, I think that everybody's situation is different, and that's what my overall stance is that we need to understand those differences. But I do admire your conviction, and I admire your consistency as well. So that would be my my one positive thing to say about Alicia.
That's awesome. I can say I have learned so much just by listening to both of you. Again, Alicia, like you mentioned, thank you for sharing your personal story about your own personal choice with you and the guy about your own abortion. And it's a great topic that needs to be discussed. And Joelle, thank you so much for standing where you stand and for sharing with us where you stand. And it helps us to see, for me, it helps us to see where the fight is. Because this is my first time actually sitting down with someone who is willing to have a discussion about their stance on the topic of abortions. So it helps me to understand where is their fight. Why do they support pro-choice? So it has definitely been an insightful debate for me. Definitely.
Absolutely. It's a lot more insightful to have these types of conversations and going at it in Facebook comments. So there's that.
Because you can understand what each other is saying, because everybody always thinks that the next person is mad.
Correct. Exactly. You can't read tone and context over the internet through text. So talking with our actual voices and communicating is always the most effective way.
Absolutely. I thank y'all all so much. Joel, we're going to be some more debates and some more open conversations. And I hope whenever we send it to you, that you are available to come back on with us.
I'd love to. Thank you so much,
Joel is going to be back, because me and Joel have some more to talk about.
Oh, yeah.
I think so as well. We'll figure something out. I can't wait to watch the replay of this, because I don't like listening to myself, but I'm going to do it.
I don't be either. Oh my God, we're the same, because I don't think I'm going to watch it either. I'm not
right. I just let the people say what they want, and I'm like, oh yeah, I guess I did say that. So we'll just see how that goes. Right. But thank you so much, ladies. It was great being here with you guys, and I hope you post this ASAP, because I want to share it and post it. So please go ahead and post it like now if you can. ASAP.
If y'all want to share, just mention like social media to be followed at, go ahead and do it, because you don't know who's going to get their hands on this video. So go ahead and let loose whatever social media is.
I certainly will.
Go ahead, Joel.
Oh, no, I just said I certainly will. I will.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, good. I was supposed to like announce it on the social, like on the Zoom now. Like if you have certain platforms you want people to follow you at, you can mention like now.
Okay.
Felicia, if you'd like to go first, be my guest.
Wait to announce it on Zoom?
I'm sorry. I thought she said, I may have misunderstood. I thought she said to announce your social medias or whatever here.
Yeah.
Oh, like on here? Well, I just have my social media. Alicia Renee is where I am on Facebook. And then my Instagram is also Alicia Renee, but it's spelled with the number 5 for the S in my name, and then the 3s in my Renee is R3N33. So that's my Instagram. So it's like my Facebook, but with 3s and 5s.
Facebook, I'm Joel Brown. I post a lot on there. Also on Twitter. I don't use Twitter too often. I scroll a lot, but I don't post much. But my YouTube channel, I do plan on posting videos again. I'm actually going to post this debate onto the YouTube channel probably tomorrow or the day after. But yeah, my YouTube channel is Ultimate, and it's going to sound corny. I made it when I was like 10. It's Ultimate Kill Storm. I know it's a lot, but